What's up, guys? This is Reborn X again with another how-to video. On the previous video I showed how to change the brake pads and rotors on the rear of a Del Sol. This is a 1995 Del Sol. The front is not too much different from the back. There are slight differences, but on the front I'm only changing the brake pads today. Since I will be upgrading these brakes soon, I don't want to waste the money on rotors, so I'm just going to upgrade. I'm just going to replace the brake pads today. I mean, some of you would say, why are you replacing the brake pads when it's all nice and beefy? Well, this car's been sitting for years, and tomorrow's going on a dyno, and I just want to make sure that I don't have any issues. I don't want the brakes. I don't want to. I'm trying to avoid any issues, basically. So I got a cheap set of brake pads from AutoZone. I'm just going to replace them here real quick. And this is how you do it. First, of course, you want to jack the car up, remove the wheel, and make sure you have some kind of support going on, so that way you don't, your car doesn't fall on you and cause some injuries. And the next, you want to reach down here for this bolt behind the brake caliper. It's a 12 millimeter. Just reach back here with a socket or a wrench, whichever you have, and just broke it loose. Once you broke it loose, just go ahead and remove it by hand. Just go ahead and remove it by hand once you break it loose. And then next, all you do is just grab the brake caliper, slipped up, and make sure you use a bungee cord or something to hold it up in place. Alright, so that way it doesn't fall back down while you're working. And it just did. I let it go for 1 second and it just fell back down. So I slipped it up. Use a bungee cord. You can pick this bungee cord up from a lot of places. I know you hear me mention AutoZone a lot. That's because AutoZone is the closest parts store to me, and I have a pretty good relationship with them, so I'm there quite often. But then just remove these brake pads, like so. Do the same thing on the other side. Remove that. And then what I'm going to do next is clean this surface just a little bit. Alright, I'm going to use some brake part cleaner. And I want to lay something down underneath just to catch the fluid, so it doesn't mess up my floor too bad. Okay, these are the brake pads that I picked up from AutoZone. They are just some Duralast Gold, and I think they run for about 40 bucks or so. I can't remember off the top of my head. What I usually do is compare the old pad to the new pad to make sure that it is exactly the same, because you don't want to have any issue. The pad might be too small or too large, and then you would have issue installing them. But as you can see, these line up perfectly, so I shouldn't have any problem putting these on the car. So toss the old ones there. I'm gonna have the new ones just out of the box. I'll lay them right here. And what I usually do is I stick the box underneath like this to catch all the fluid that drips, so that way it doesn't mess up my floor too bad. Next, I'm gonna hit it up with some brake part cleaner just to clean the rotors up a little bit. So yep. I'm gonna do the same thing for the other side. Okay. This may seem like a waste to some people, but this is what I like to do, and I do buy this by the bulk, so I'll get them for fairly cheap. Alright, I'm just going to let it dry for a second. Then I'm going to go ahead and slap the brake pads on here. Alright. If you pay attention, one end of the brake pad is always going to curve the same way as the outer of the rotors. And that's the same way you want to place them in. You want to make sure that when you put them in, that both of them curve the same way. Alright. I always tell people there's always one way to do brakes. If you try to put it this way, as you can see, it will not work. So it's only common sense to install it this way. Alright. And then next, you do the same thing on the other side. The other side would always have the clip. Well, a lot of times we'll have the clip, but I believe I've installed a couple in the past that didn't have clips like this. Alright. And then when you install it, it would be like this on the other side. The clip would be up top. So just go behind here. Okay. That's when you put it on. Make sure there's no gap between the brake pads and the rotor like there is right here. So all I gotta do now, I'll just push it back in some more. There you go. Now it's in. It's all the way in. Alright, make sure there's no gap. And next, this is something I like to do. I like to apply a little bit of grease on the outer side of the brake pads. I know some people skip, some people don't do it, but hey, do what you like. This is something that I do just to prevent from making all those weird noises when you first install new brakes. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply some grease, and then after that, I'm also gonna compress the piston right here on the caliper. Because if you don't compress the piston until it's flush, the new this brake caliper will never fit over the brake pads and the rotor. So you always want to compress this. Alright? So once you compress that, all you do is flip it down, bolt it up, and you can call it a day. So now I'm going to go ahead and compress the pistons using a C-clamp. This is my handy dandy C-clamp with a quick release. All you do is just push the button and pull this out. Like that. Push the button, pull out, and it comes right out. Alright? That's it. Everything's falling apart, it looks like. Alright guys, C-clamp is on and ready to compress the piston in. As you can see, this is the way I hook it up. Somebody else might have it hooked up differently, but this is how I hooked it up and it works fine. Alright? So, as you can see, one end of the C-clamp is behind the caliper. The other end is right here, touching the brake pad, the old brake pad. So I'm going to use that to compress the piston back in. And all I do, just twist the handle. As I'm twisting the handle, piston is being compressed. Alright, I'm going to compress it until it's flush. Now it's flush. So I'm going to release the C-clamp. Alright. Look at it, nice and flush. This camera will just focus. It's nice and flush. So now you can go ahead and actually flip it down and it will go over the brakes just fine. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put some grease on it, on the outer part of the brake pads. Alright guys, I just applied grease on the outer side of the brake pads on both this end and behind it. Got grease on both of them, so I'm going to release the bungee cord. As you can see, it's ready to boot. Alright, and then just go ahead, make sure everything line everything up. Next, find your bolt. It's around here somewhere. There it is. Come here, little buddy. Alright, just insert that on here. I always hand tight. Okay, next you can go ahead and put a wrench on it or ratchet in the socket, whichever you prefer. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put the camera down and tighten it some more, and after that I'm gonna install the wheels and lower the car back down off the jack. In the previous video I mentioned that you do want to pump the brakes after you're done, and doing the front brakes is no different. Whenever you do a brake job, make sure you pump the brakes, and it's good practice to also bleed the brakes. Bleeding the brakes just involves somebody sitting on the driver's side and you're using a bleeder kit, which you can find really cheap from parts stores. So the person would sit on the driver's side. You would tell them to push on the brake pedal. Once they push on the brake pedal, you will use a wrench to loosen the bleeder screw right here, and then fluid will shoot out. Alright, and then you would tell the person to make sure they hold down the brake pedal. Once they push it down, they need to hold it down, and then you would open this up. Alright, let the fluid shoot out. Then you would close it back up. Alright, and then you repeat the process over and over until you get all the air out and the fluid coming out is clear. While you're doing this, make sure you keep an eye on the brake reservoir. Alright, right here. If you don't know what it is, this is the brake reservoir. Make sure you keep an eye on it. As you can tell, my fluid is very dirty right now. This is going to be changed, and I'm also going to bleed the brakes when I'm done with this process. But keep an eye on this, because if this gets low, you are in a world of trouble. You basically will have to redo everything you just did as far as bleeding the sides. And the way I bleed my brakes is I would start from the rear side. That's the most farther from the reservoir. So that would be your rear right, which is the rear by the passenger side. So once you do the rear by the passenger side, then I would go over to the other end, the rear left. Then I would bleed that side, and then I would come up to the front right, bleed this side, and then to the driver's side up front and bleed that. That's the way that I bleed it. Alright, and folks, all that's left to do is put this wheels and tire on, and we are done for the night. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful, please give it a like, and if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. And yes, and I'll be seeing you guys soon again. Alright guys, peace out.